Hey everyone, I'm joined by Mitch Milani, Penguins fan, also runs the Bottom Line View channel on YouTube. We'll drop that link in the description. Milani, big playoff coming up for the NHL, and I'm looking at the East matchups. Obviously, these are two of the more competitive matchups in the first round. I think a lot of people can make that argument. So, Penguins, Islanders. Obviously, we've seen that matchup in recent memory. Didn't go too well for the Pens. So I guess looking at the matchup right now, looking at the Penn season, how do you think the matchup's going to go down? What are your expectations for the series? And I guess outside of the obvious ones, what are your X factors?
First off, bro, appreciate the NHL Stanley Cup playoff content. Lots of videos out there. Everybody go check them out. Thanks for having me on. As for the Pittsburgh Penguins, of course, there's a side of me that is dreading the Islanders matchup because of what we saw a couple years ago. Just knowing how the Islanders play, seeing it on a consistent basis, the way they like to slow it down, they like to play their defensive style, and that just really doesn't mesh well with the Pittsburgh Penguins like at all. You know, Pittsburgh wants to play free-flowing, offensive, fast, and when the Islanders slow it down, it gives them that opportunity to kind of wear the Penguins out and win a series. So I'll say this was the series or the matchup that I wanted most for Pittsburgh, because this season, Pittsburgh has dominated this matchup and they've actually been able to score on the Islanders this year, which has been nice to see.
Yeah.
Overall, I don't think the Islanders are quite the team they were a couple years ago, especially defensively. And it doesn't seem like they have that scoring touch to keep up with the way the Penguins are scoring right now. But man, these last couple of seasons in the playoffs doesn't give me that super confidence that I've had in recent years with Pittsburgh.
Yeah, well, I'll say this. I think Pittsburgh fans, maybe in a similar way to Leaf fans or to a lot of fan bases like recently, that if you look at like Washington and the upsets, then they go on to win the cup, or like St. Louis got upset a bunch of times. Tampa gets swept by Columbus. Like we see a bunch of these like kind of just crazy upsets happening. And obviously Pittsburgh was a victim of that last year, losing to Montreal. So a lot of Pens, well, I'd say there's a lot of Pens fans that are still somehow super confident, but then there's a lot of other Pens fans that are real nervous coming into this matchup because of what they saw a couple of years ago. So I guess, yeah, I would love to hear a couple X factors in terms of players from you. And also, I mean, the big storyline, well, I think there's a couple storylines, but Sid, I think for Pens fans, obviously they realize the year he's had. I think personally, looking at his year and watching the Pens, I don't think Crosby's given up. Like, I don't think he's getting enough respect this year. I think this guy could be in the conversation for Selke. I think if not for the years of McDavid and Matthews, I think Crosby could have been in the Hart conversation. I mean, look at the offense. They were so slim on offensive weapons for like a good stretch there. And it was like, if you looked at that lineup, like it was kind of like fill-ins. And then Pittsburgh has been that in the past, but Crosby over a point per game, his defensive numbers were there. He was like kind of caring in a lot of aspects. So I guess talk about Sid a little bit and talk about Malkin, what he can, I mean, obviously the injuries have been a problem this year. Like Malkin has struggled with in the past, and the laziness and all that. And then I guess maybe name a couple other X factors on the team.
Yeah. Sidney Crosby, I still, like you said, don't think he gets enough respect. He's almost in that kind of area where it's Crosby. Like it's just expected. And it's been like that for a while. I would say at least like the last 5 years, since he kind of solidified himself as like a top 5, top 10 player of all time. Everyone's
especially
like, okay,
after they won the back-to-back cups.
Right. It's like, it's Crosby. Okay. He's just going to do his thing. But to continue to see the longevity of what he's been able to do, and then his craft of getting better and better in certain areas of his game, you know, with face-offs, defensively, different things, small things. Right. He may not be the same offensive guy that he used to be just in terms of explosiveness, but he's still got that touch. It's just like, I think he's fine-tuned his overall game. And that's why I would put him in that Selke conversation. I don't think should get the Hart. Obviously, I think that goes to McDavid, but I think the Selke will be, or should be, at least a conversation. As for Evgeny Malkin, he is the ultimate X factor. You brought up X factors. This guy is the X factor for Pittsburgh every single playoffs, because when Evgeny Malkin is playing well, we've seen he can take over series and take over games. And like when they win the cup, as good as Crosby has been, Malkin has been just like right there, if not leading the team in points. So really, if he can somehow get it going, I mean, that just number one, number two on the first and second line is just too much for a lot of teams to handle. Outside of Evgeny Malkin, who's kind of always an X factor, especially this year because of his up and down play. He had a streak where he was really good. He got hurt and then he's come back. He's looked a little sluggish. I'm hoping he can turn it on. But I think it's really the third line. What we've seen recently, Jared McCann and Jeff Carter, specifically that kind of combination. I mean, Carter's been tearing it up since he was traded to Pittsburgh. He had a 4-goal game, like consistently just well-rounded and playing good defense. But I mean, the scoring from him has been out of this world, way better than I expected. And Jared McCann has been really, really good this year. I mean, they play him at center on the wing, and his speed, his shot just is another dimension of offense that they have in the lower end of that depth of their roster, which is nice to see. Those two guys, that third line, I think is really a big X factor for them.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think on the Malkin point, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. Look at this series last year against Montreal, but he dogged it, was going out for a Sunday skate, no effort, literally looked like he was not in the series at all. Yeah. And I mean, Montreal does what Montreal does. So I agree with you. I think the Carter addition was very underrated, very under the radar, and it's proved well so far in the offensive system for Pittsburgh. And I think, I mean, we talked about it kind of pre-recording here. I mean, you look at some of the guys that they've brought in that were heavily criticized on Rutherford actually bringing them in, and obviously he's not in the picture anymore. But you talk about CC, who's played a good role for them. I mean, for me, I've always said like CC was horrible with Toronto, but in a third pair role, I think he's a fine defenseman there. But he's actually played, as you said, I mean, a second pair guy. And I mean, Matheson's been really good for Pittsburgh when healthy. And then you look at the other guys. I mean, Dumoulin's that's a guy you want in the playoffs, right?
Bro,
that perfect style.
He is, I gotta say, he might be the most underrated defenseman in the entire league.
Yeah.
Like, I know that he's not sexy or anything. Like, he's just like a stay-at-home.
No, he's so good.
Defenseman.
Well, I mean, look at some of the guys in the league. Like, you look at a guy like Dumoulin, you look at a guy like Brandon Carlo, you look at a guy like TJ Brody. Are they talked about enough? No, but they play the game right, and they're so valuable.
Even look at what they do when he's in the lineup and what they do when he's not in the lineup. Yeah. Like, even look at the play at Chris Letang when he's in the lineup and when he's not in the lineup. Like, that's something you can actually look at. Like, you can't look at points or anything with him. Look at just the difference in the play of the team overall. And that's Dumoulin to me. But you brought up a great point with the second pair now, which was expected to be the third pair, but they've mostly been playing as the second pair. I think the difference in Pittsburgh this year, the reason they've finished first in the East, is they don't have that pair that you're just dreading that they're on the ice. You're like, like
they don't have the Jack Johnson anymore.
And Jack Johnson was a disaster. Like, that was just the possession time, just the goals allowed. Like, literally that duo was a disaster. So for them to have just 6 defensemen where you're solid all the way through and you actually don't mind that pair being on the ice and they can all skate, which I like. So that's good. I mean, they just fit the system well, I think, in Pittsburgh.
So we've kind of covered a little bit of the forward group conversation, a little bit of the defense conversation.
Right.
I know a lot of Pens fans are worried about the goaltending here because you're looking at a guy like Varlamov, who is 100% in the Vezina conversation. Sorokin's had a great year for the Islanders as well. So they got a 1-2 punch there. Pittsburgh on the other side. What Jari are you getting? Is DeSmith going to get games if Jari struggles? What is your mindset there? Jari, DeSmith, Varlamov, Sorokin, is goaltending going to be an issue for Pittsburgh?
Honestly, with Pittsburgh, to me, it's always more about how they're playing team defense as opposed to actual goaltending. I think a big thing that Pittsburgh fans miss with that team and with the goalie is like the number of times they leave their goalie out to dry, like, is just ridiculous. Like, it must be at the top of the list of the league, like, every year. With the amount of like ridiculous 2-on-1s and 3-on, like odd man situations that are just terrible. Like, yeah, Jerry's had some bad games, but honestly, I think when we've seen Pittsburgh go far in the playoffs, it's because as a unit, they're playing good defense. They're not allowing a lot of, easy opportunities. They're not, they're playing hard on defense. They're working together. And that, I think, is more important than anything, because then the goalie can gain some confidence, whoever it is. And you never really know how that's going to go down. But really, when Pittsburgh has won the cup, the goalie really hasn't been the superstar for the most part. Yeah. It's mostly been about their offense and team defense, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I think the matchup obviously favors the Islanders here. And I think Varlamov, sure. I mean, the Islanders will have a good chance of winning this series if Varlamov can play the way he's been playing this year. I mean, when you talk about like 925, 930 save percentage, I think that's stupid good, right? In a 7-game series, if that can be it. And we've seen Varlamov play well in the playoffs, but that's just it for the Pens. If they can get good goaltending to the point where, like, even if he's like almost playing to that level or like almost matching up to Varlamov, I think you can make an argument that Pittsburgh has the advantages in a lot of other aspects, right? Obviously, I think it's 2 experienced coaches for the most part here. I think Trotz maybe has the edge, but Trotz versus Mike Sullivan here. And I think for the Islanders, scoring's been an issue. So I think Trotz is even more so against this Pittsburgh team, and watching what happened with Pittsburgh a couple of years ago. And I mean, last year, you could argue Montreal plays a similar style. I'm not going to say to the full extent of Trotz and Islanders, but Montreal played a little bit of a similar style in terms of slowing it down and then playing that transition counterattack game.
And Price was like ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. Out of his mind. So that's why I'm saying Varlamov can really put a dent into Pittsburgh if he plays to a level like that. So I think clear as day, Pittsburgh's the 1 seed here. They are the favorites, but as we know in the playoffs, especially in the NHL, anything can happen and upsets can happen. So I guess for you to kind of cap off the Islanders Penguins conversation here, looking at the whole Pens team, do you think they have this series, and how do you see it going down? Maybe if you want to give the length of the series, maybe a possible prediction.
Yeah, like you said, I think especially in this division, as you said at the beginning, both these matchups are really competitive, and all 4 of these teams deserve to be here. They're good teams, and they know each other well, obviously, especially with recent playoff actual series. That's huge. So for me, I just like the way Pittsburgh's playing this year as opposed to last year or even the year before. They seem to be more cohesive. I think their offense has more layers to it in terms of, I think more people are contributing, and the defense is
Kapanen.
Yes, for sure. And the defense isn't a liability the way it's been the last couple of years. So I think Pittsburgh should win this series. And if I was a Penguins fan, I would expect to win this series. I wouldn't
if
be
you were
surprised.
a Penguins fan.
No, I mean, like, I am, but like people out there, if you are a Penguins fan, you should expect to win this series. I'll say that they win it in 6 games.
Ooh, Milani's a little more confident this year.
I'm a little confident, but like there's always that thing in the back of my mind,
Yeah. All right, we're joined by Kimberly Moisa, Isles Girl 3, big Islanders fan. So the Isles are playing the Penguins in round 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Kim, I guess just right off the bat, how do you feel your Islanders are going to match up against the Penguins?
Not well. I feel like this is going to be a really tough matchup for the New York Islanders. During the season, we did not match up against them well. Penguins take the majority of games against us. And just for some reason, the Penguins just seem to be able to shut down our type of game. Not many goals produced against the Penguins, and of course, therefore, not many wins. I saw on moneypuck.com that they put a 67% likelihood for the Penguins to win this series and a 33% chance for the Islanders to win this series. But here's the thing about that, like going into it, not having our hopes up for, last time this happened where we went into the playoffs with not a good record going into it, just not a good series of games and string of games against that team. We ended up sweeping them. So I'm trying to keep a good outlook against the Penguins, trying to keep, just the hope and the love for my team up, because who knows, like when the Islanders go into a playoff team, they could show up as a totally different team. So I'm curious to see how they do against the Penguins. We have a good playoff matchup record against them as well. So I'm hoping to see a better record from them this offseason.
Yeah, and obviously you guys swept them last time you played in the playoffs. So I guess if you look at that, it's kind of based on what you said. Is that much of an indication, or do you feel like these two teams are just too different from that year?
I mean, it's definitely been shaken up from that year. It's definitely not the same chemistries, especially with the Islanders, especially not the same lines. I'm curious to see. I don't think it's going to be a sweep, honestly. I think that might have been a little fluky, but I think honestly this might go to a 6 or 7 game series. I think the Penguins are an absolutely, incredible team. I mean, when you got a guy like Sidney Crosby on your team, this is definitely going to be a battle. I think Matthew Barzal said it best in his interview with the media. He said that it was going to be a war, and I absolutely agree with that. I think this will definitely be a war with the Penguins, and the East Division is tough for a reason, and every single team is going to be the biggest battle for the playoffs, in my opinion. So we're going to see what happens here. With Palmieri and Zajac, Palmieri, I had a glimpse of that he could show just a little bit more in these playoffs. I think he really maybe is holding back a little bit, but when I saw him play against his former team, the Devils, I saw that fire burn in him, how much he wanted a goal. He started crashing the net that I've heard him do. This was the Palmieri that I've seen the Islanders play against, and he ended up getting a goal that night because of how bad he wanted it, how bad he pressured the net, and he just got it past Blackwood. And I feel like if we see a little bit more of that Kyle Palmieri going into these playoffs, you're going to see more goal production from him, and that's what I'm more excited to see about Kyle Palmieri going into the lineup. Guys that, though, I can see stepping up a little bit more are the younger guys like Dobson and Wahlstrom. Wahlstrom I love because those two guys have that shoot first mentality, and you've been seeing a little bit more production out of Wahlstrom as of late. You put him with Pajot, that lineup works so well together. They have really good chemistries together, him and Pajot, and he's been able to produce as of late. And Dobson also has that mentality when he's got, he does some rookie mistakes at the blue line. It's, as expected. He has Andy Green.
Defensive coverage is suspect sometimes too.
Yeah. he makes some, rookie mistakes. Andy Green's there to help him out, which I've seen Andy Green really step up to help him. But he has that shoot first mentality too, and I like seeing him when we're in the offensive zone just rip it at the net, because that rebound can happen to anyone in front. So that's what I would say keep your eye on is Oliver, but especially Oliver Wahlstrom. So my prediction for the series, it's honestly going to depend with round one. I hate making round one is the big indicator for me. If you know me, I did the stats for the last 6 years of how round one has affected teams. 70% of the time in the last 6 years, if you won the first game, you win the series. And I want to see how they come out and play differently in playoffs, because I do think the Islanders will play differently in playoffs. I think this is either going to go to 6 or 7 games. I do not think it's going to be a sweep. I do not think it's going to be just like an easy, hopefully God, it's not going to be just an easy series for one team or the other. I think it's going to go to 6 or 7. It's going to be a chippy series for both teams, and it's going to be rough. And the way the Islanders have been playing lately, it's been kind of lackluster, not many drives for the net, lot of passing. If they keep doing this passing, looking for the perfect opportunity and power plays got to pick it up. Then I don't see us winning against the Penguins. I don't. But if the Islanders can come out as a new team in this playoffs, the team that I saw win 9 straight earlier this season, going into the trade deadline, that team before the trade deadline, that team I can see beating the Penguins. That team I can see at least, mustering up enough, effort and enough shot production to beat the Penguins and shut down Crosby, Malkin, and especially Rust loves to score against us. So definitely keep an eye on Rust. They got to, shut it down in the D zone, which they know how to do. This team is so good defensively. They know how to do that, but it's about offensively stop the pretty passes and just take those shots on net. You never know what's going to go in.